Thanks, Kelly. Well, let's get this pre-election day show started for you. We're going to start off on the Blue Couch this day with Dr. Joe Morris, chair of Mercyhurst University Department of Political Science. Joe, welcome. I know you've been on the Blue Couches, but not with us. Welcome to First at 4. We're so happy to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. I want to start talking with you today about polling, because it's really changed over the last decade or so with the election cycle.
Yeah, it most certainly has. 2016 was an absolute disaster for the polling industry. If you'll recall, Hillary Clinton was forecast to win just about every state in the nation. And as it turned out, Donald Trump ended up winning. And we saw some improvements in 2020 and 2022, but that's left a lot of uncertainty around those polling numbers we're seeing today. And you may have seen just recently, University of Michigan just changed their polling numbers. They released polling numbers and then they said, no, we're going to take that back and we're going to alter these. Okay. So we're a little uncertain about polling numbers right now.
How do they get compiled? I personally don't think that I've ever been polled. And I've never talked to anybody who has. Me either. I get these texts that want me to take surveys, but I'm afraid, and I don't know what that is. So how are they polling today?
Well, you know, historically, the way we did it was with what we called a random digit dial. We would simply compile digits into a phone number and we would call them within a certain geographic area. And unfortunately, the response rate for those surveys went down and down. It used to be that we had a 70, 80, 90% response rate. Before we would even consider a poll good, 90% of the people we contacted had to participate. Today, those response rates are way, way down. So what we've seen over the last few years is polling organizations trying to compensate for that by employing different methodologies, including those text messages.
Right. And we just showed the latest poll from NBC News, the final poll of this election cycle, 49% dead heat, at least here in Pennsylvania, between Trump and Harris. Can we trust those numbers going into tomorrow?
Well, if you drive around Erie County, you would probably think, yes, you can trust them, absolutely. Because in the places we see usually only Democratic yard signs, we see a lot of Republican yard signs, and the same is true in the southern part of the county. We find some Harris yard signs there as well. So it looks to us, every indication seems to be that this is going to be a very close election in terms of the vote, at least in key states.
Yeah. And we've been hearing a lot. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Your thoughts on that going into tomorrow?
Yeah, you know, I was just talking with some of my students and a couple colleagues today about elections in our lifetime that have seemed really important. And I think what makes this one seem real important to people is that we have a really clear contrast between the candidates. Yes. They're not subtle differences, two fundamentally different directions that these candidates want to take the nation. So in that regard, I think it's an absolutely wonderful election to be a part of, and I'm excited to see the results, hopefully tomorrow night, but if not, Wednesday.
I was going to say, what do you think on that? How long do you think we're going to have to wait?
It may be quite some time in particular states.
There's a deadline, isn't it? Isn't there a cutoff deadline, and is it different for different states?
It's different for every state. So some states will still count mail-in ballots after the election, some will not. Pennsylvania, for example, only begins counting mail-in ballots on the day of the election. So we can expect some differences between the states. But one thing I would stress is that just because states are slow to report results doesn't mean there's a problem.
Right.
We often jump to the conclusion that, oh my gosh, there must be some sort of catastrophe, there's something amiss in the...
Or something malicious happening.
Right. Yeah. No, they're just doing their job, and they're doing it carefully, right? They're just making sure.
They are, and they all have procedures that they have to follow, intended to make sure they're counting correctly. So I would urge everyone to just be patient over the next couple of days.
You'll be with us tomorrow?
You bet.
Erie News Now is generally speaking.
You
we
bet.
got you all day. All right, I love it. Joe, thanks for coming in today. We do appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah.